good to go.
Great. So thank you to those of you that are here. I'd just like to introduce Trevor Russell from UQ. So Trevor is the mastermind behind APPLinkup, and he's been working on the new improved interface, which he will run through with you all today. So I'll hand over to Trevor. Sorry, I should have introduced myself too. I'm Casey. I'm from La Trobe, and I'm the chair of the Clinical Education Managers of Australia and New Zealand.
Great, thanks very much, Casey. We'll get started with that. Thanks everyone for joining us. We will put this recording up for those that were unable to attend the session. What I hope to do today is just to run through the system from the perspective of the Facility Clinical Education Coordinator account. So we'll just go through some of the main features from that account type. I don't think we'll have time to go through the other sort of account types today at all, but if you have any questions, certainly please ask them as we go along. You can either unmute yourself and ask just while I'm speaking, or you can use the chat function, and we'll try and address those as we go along. So hopefully you're all familiar, I guess, with the roles of a facility coordinator, and no doubt most of you have been using the old system. Possibly in the old system, the facility coordinator's interface was perhaps the most complex of any of the interfaces. There were some things in there that were not entirely intuitive. So we've tried to address all of those in this new version. But the three primary things that we go through, I guess, as a facility coordinator are accepting CE applications into the system. So clinical educators within your facility, you're responsible for approving those. Allocating students to clinical educators is another big role of the facility coordinator. And then, of course, completing APPs for the students that you yourselves might be supervising. So we'll go through those main functions today. So first of all, the website will appear at the existing URL. It's just got a little prefix in front of it at the moment, but when this goes live, you'll just access it as you normally would at applinkup.com. Log in the top right corner here, and I'm going to be logging into as a facility coordinator in a pretend facility called the Learning Hospital. So one of the first things you'll note here is that you can be the facility coordinator for multiple facilities, and when you first log in, it'll ask you to select which facility you would like to actively administer as you log in. So I'll click on this one to start with. So this is your main interface then. So what we've tried to do is group all of the most important things on this front screen that you'll land on. So the things that you're most likely to need to do as a clinical educator, as a facility coordinator rather, and that is, like I said, approve accounts, which you'll do through these tasks to complete over here. It'll be allocating students to clinical educators, which you can see this number here, and then just sort of monitoring the general placements within your facility. So just by way of orientation to the dashboard, this tells us for the current active facility, which is the Learning Hospital that I logged in as, we've got 21 total placements this year. 5 of those placements are right now at this point in time. So, you know, by today's date, it knows that 5 students are currently supposed to be attending this facility. It's giving us an alert here, an action that 5 students require allocation to a CE. So anything with that red exclamation mark lets you know that there's something that you need to do, you know, reasonably urgently in the system, because those students will be waiting on their clinical educator. You can see some other things, some familiar things perhaps from the old system, is this concept of an active year. So we do use that concept in the new system. So whatever that year is set at will be the year that you're currently engaging with through all the functions in the system. So if I change that active year back to 2019, everything I do in here with respect to placements and so forth would relate to that 2019 year. I'll just go back to 2021. Also along the top here, you've got your active facility. So at any stage, you can click on that and change your active facility. You can see now that that Royal Hospital becomes the active facility. I'll just change that back. And then you've got things like the ability to log out of the screen over here. This button simply minimizes that left-hand menu or maximizes it if you're running out of screen space. Over on the left side, then, if we run down the menu, we will go through these one at a time as we go through the hour. But a couple of things just up front. We do have the concept of being able to associate an image with the user. Both educators, university staff, and students can upload their image into the system. So to do that, we click on these initials up here. We can go to this change button here underneath the image. And here you can simply go in, choose a file off your system. So I'm going to be this person today, and we'll upload that. And there we go. So now the students will see this, the other educators will see this. And I think it's a nice way of students to be able to sort of know who their educators are, perhaps before they turn up on day one. It is optional whether you do that step or not, both for educators and for students. So we do have various menu items down the left that we will go through over the course of the session today. But probably the most urgent thing for us to do based on this screen is that we have 5 students here that require an allocation to a clinical educator for their placement. So I'll go in and show you that process to start with. So all of these are clickable buttons. So if we click on this alert here, it will take us directly to those students who currently don't have an educator. So you can see here, for example, this is a person from the University of Learning. All of the universities will have a unique color, so it'll allow you to very quickly see where these students are from. But you can see students here from that university. We can see there's block 4 and block 5 placements that we need to do allocations for. So we're in block 5 now. So I might allocate this student here, Eve Bannister, to some clinical educators. So I'll click that edit button there to be able to do that. On this screen, we have the allocation details. So these are the details that have been put in from the university manager. So the placement is in a hospital, inpatient, cardiorespiratory, adult, and there has been a note entered onto this, which is it's an ICU placement. So sometimes that might be relevant for you to determine who the appropriate clinical educator is going to be. So to assign clinical educators to this student, we simply click in this box and it will give us a list of all of the clinical educators that we have for that facility. And we can add more than one. So you might have the situation where you've got 2 or 3 clinical educators that are sharing a placement. You can certainly allocate them all in here. You can see what I've done here is allocate this FacCEC as a clinical educator for this placement as well. So that means that as the facility coordinator, I can fill in an APP form for this student as well. And then we'll click the save button. So that'll take us back to this main screen. If we circulate back down through that, you can see there's Eve Bannister, and they're the people that we've just allocated that student to. Back on the main dashboard then, you'll see that number of students requiring a CE has now gone down to 4. So I'll just do that one more time so you can see that in action once more. We'll do it a bit quicker. This time though, I'll do it for Carrie Ann English. You can see for this student, it says that not only are they unallocated, but there's this additional allocation information that is required for this student. Now, this is relevant for particularly Victorian clinical schools where students tend to be allocated to clinical schools, but the universities don't determine the clinical area of placement of those students. That is determined by the clinical school. So the universities in that circumstance, they can allocate the student without specifying those details about clinical area and so forth. So if you have a student that meets those criteria, there is one additional step when you go to edit that student. The first thing that you need to do is to select those parameters. So what area that the student is going to be allocated to. And then once you save that information, you'll then get to this screen where you can assign those clinical educators to that student. And that is the allocation process for those students that currently don't have a clinical educator. I'm going to pause there very quickly and see if anyone has any questions around how to allocate educators to students? Any burning questions there? Not seeing any. I'm going to then just continue on with allocations a little bit more. So that took us directly to the screen where it just shows the students that require a CE. If I go over to the left menu here, you can see that there's an allocations menu. So currently we're on dashboard. If we go to the allocations menu, there's 3 tabs at the top. So first tab is for all students. So these are all students that have been allocated to this facility for this year. So you can see all of the students on one screen. You can see which educators were allocated to which students, and you can also see in there which currently are unallocated and need that allocation to be done. So that's the first tab. So that gives you just a global overview of all of the students in the system. Second tab is current students. So these are students that are on placement now based on this start and end date of the clinical block. So anyone who's supposed to be in your facility, you can see very quickly by clicking on that current student tab, and it'll also show you those that are unallocated. So that's a bit of an alert action item there, that you've got students in the building, but they don't yet have an educator. Hopefully you never see that because you've done your allocations prior to placement, but that's a bit of a reminder. And then the third tab here just takes us to where we were before, just listing out those unallocated students. So you get a couple of different views when you go into that allocations tab on the left there. Okay, what I'm going to do now is show you how you would approve a clinical educator account. So let's say you've got a new clinical educator in your facility. They're going to apply for an account, and I'll actually log out now and we'll do that for real. So what that clinical educator would do is they would go to the APPLinkup website. They'd click on this register button up here in the top right corner. And then they are a clinical educator, so they would go down here, find the clinical educator application button, and they would click apply here. So what I'm going to do now is just create a new account just for a fake name. So I'll put an email address in there. This person will be Bree Larson. And they select the facility that they are a clinical educator in by clicking on the Add Facility button. Here you've got a search bar, so you would search for something relevant in that facility name. So there it is there, Learning Hospital. I'm going to click Select on that one. And you can see that they can add more than one facility. So if they're an educator at multiple facilities, they can add all of those facilities at request time. And for each of those requests, it will go individually to each of those facilities. So the Learning Hospital would get an account approval request, and an additional facility, if they added one here, will go to that facility for approval. So each facility approves their own request. So then you would type a comment in here. So you might say something like, I have a student allocated in block 8. Please accept my account request, whatever the case may be. Just a message to that facility that might describe who you are if they don't know you by name, and then you click the register button. So that then gives that CE a message there that it's been requested, and they'll get an email once that FacCEC approves it. So what I'll do now is log back in as the facility coordinator, back at Learning Hospital, and you can see now that that task to complete button has an alert on there saying that there's one task to complete. And also over on this left menu, you can see we have a badge there with a 1 on it showing you've got something that you need to action. So you can either click here, or you can just click over here on this large button, and it will show you that request. So it gives you the name of the person requesting access, the date it's submitted. To view their comments, just click on the button there. And you'll be able to view any comments that they entered at the approval time. And then you've got the ability here to either approve the account or reject it. If you click reject, you'll be prompted to type something. So you'll need to give a reason for rejection, and they will receive that reason in an email. So let's say you didn't know who the person was, and you clicked on that reject button and you say something to that effect. They'll get an email with that. And in the email, it says, if you believe you really should have access to that facility, apply again and put more comments in that comment field to explain why you need access. So that process would just continue again. They can reapply. You'll see this request again and be able to view their comments, and then you'll be able to make your decision based upon that. But in this case, I'll click on the approve button. It gives us a message that the account has been created and they'll be notified via email. So they'll receive an email at that point with their username and their password, and they'll be able to log into the system. And back on the dashboard, you can see that that task has gone away, as has the badge over here. So that's the process of processing those account requests. Now, in the old system, we disabled any reminders to facility coordinators or CEs really from the system. So originally we had system reminder emails saying you've got some accounts that need approval. We had some complaints about that in the early days because of the frequency of those. So we removed it from the old system. That has been reinstated into the new system, but you do have the ability to control how frequently you individually will receive those reminder emails. So just at this point, I'll just say that you will from time to time get reminder emails based on that frequency that you specify. And those emails would say something like, you have 3 account approvals to action at this point in time. And it'll give you the link then to log into the system. So unfortunately, in the old system, we did have circumstances where facility coordinators weren't logging in regularly, and there might have been 5, 6, or 7 CE requests that had been sitting there for a period of time. So that's the task. The next thing on the menu then is My Educators. So this is your way of seeing who all of your clinical educators are for your particular facility. So you can see the names and email addresses there. You do have this ability then to disassociate their account from your facility. So say a CE leaves, they go and work somewhere else, you can remove their access by clicking this remove button. When you do that, you'll be prompted to make sure that that's what you want to do. If you click remove here, which I will do, you'll see that it removed that clinical educator. That clinical educator will still be able to log into APPLinkup, so their account still exists, but they won't see anything related to this facility, and they won't be able to access any APP forms that were associated with this facility. So basically, they'll still be able to log in. So if they were a CE somewhere else, they'll still retain that. It just removes the link to your particular facility. So that's worth looking at from time to time to make sure that your CE list is current, that you don't have any old staff members that are still there that would be able to access those old APPs. So you will have remembered when we did the initial allocation, I allocated some of the students to myself, to this particular person. So in this new system, to see your students, you've just got a tab over here called My Students. So in the old system, it was a really non-intuitive way of changing your view and then viewing your students. We've got rid of all that. Now you've just got a My Students tab on the left here, which will show you, first of all, current students. So these are your students currently on placement right now at this point in time. You can change that tab to all students, and these are all of the students that you would have been a CE for over the course of the year. So with your current student, it defaults to that because that's most likely what you're wanting to do, is go in and complete forms. Just to run through a few things on this list though, you can see where the student's from, what university they're from. If you want to see allocation details, you can click on that little information link there. It'll tell you exactly the clinical areas, the notes, the block times, etc. in there. To get more information about the student themselves, you can click this link. It'll show you their photo, their name, student number, email address, and if they've provided a phone number, you'll have that there. So it's very easy to get information about your student if you need to call them because they're running late or whatever the case may be, you've got their contact details right there on that screen that you can access. Here we've got some details around number of hours absent for this particular block or any notes associated with this particular block. So if we go in there, we can see that there has been one entry made saying that the student was absent for 8 hours on this date range. If we wanted to add some more absentee hours, we could go in here. Let me do it for yesterday, perhaps. So let's say they were absent yesterday. If they were only absent for a single day, you just put the same date for start and end date, and then you can add your number of hours that they were absent there. And you'll see that that's added an entry there for absenteeism for that particular student. If we go back to the student now, you can see that that total has incremented to 12 hours now. Same thing with the clinical notes. As you go into here, these CE notes are visible to all of the clinical educators that have been allocated to this student. So if you're sharing a placement with another educator, they will also be able to view that entry that you've made. So that's an entry that was made, on that date. If you wanted to make another entry, you just click add entry, you give it a subject matter, a subject there and some text there, and you would save that as well. And now you can see that that's in there and you could view that one as well. So this is only visible to educators, not to students. So if you're sharing a placement, this is a really good way to share notes or to share maybe details on what the student has or hasn't seen. Or if you just want to leave a note for the educator for the following day to make sure that that student has done X, Y, or Z, you can use this mechanism and this process to do that. And when that educator goes into this area to complete their forms, they will see those notes there and be able to click on them and view them. So the forms then. So like the old system, you need to complete your mid-APP form before you do your end-APP form. We've got better signaling around where you're up to with your forms now. Last time we relied on colors. Now it will give you information. So if you try and click on that one, it'll say you cannot complete this one until the mid-unit has first been completed. And then it'll also give you that tip. If you don't want to complete your mid-unit form, you can scroll to the bottom and select skip. So more instructions, again, with all of them saying you can't complete something until the other one's done. In the system, we've tend to use purple as the doing button and red as a bit of a stoplight system. So you can't do anything that's generally red in the system. So let's take a look at the form. If we click on the mid-unit APP, this form will be familiar to all of you, very familiar, but there's a few differences to the old system. So it tells you who the student is, who the educators are, whether it's mid or end unit. It gives you the instructions there on what the ratings mean. Like the old system, if you hover over the question, it gives you all of the performance indicators in just a quick drop down, so you can very quickly see those. And if you hover over an answer, it tells you, or a number rather, it tells you the definition of that particular rating. Someone just said frozen. Have I frozen there?
All good now.
All good? Okay, did you miss anything? I can go back. I'll just recover that. So I'm just saying that you can hover over questions here to see the performance indicators for questions. You can also hover over the numbers on the right to see the descriptors associated with those particular ratings. So in terms of grading the student or clicking on these numbers, like the old system, you can simply click on those numbers. You get immediate feedback whether that click has been saved or not. So if the website was to crash now, because we've got 3 green things next to that, we know that they've been securely saved. There is still the concept of unable to assess this particular item. So you can see up here, NA means not assessed, item was not able to be assessed. And if you give a low score like the old system, you'll be asked to add a comment associated with that low score for this particular item. For each group then, for each area, You've got that concept of strengths and areas for improvement. So like we did in the old system, and also the performance indicators, an entire list of performance indicators associated with these particular items in this section. Unlike the old system though, we do now have the ability to format these comments. So if you wanted to emphasize things like not, you can bold, you can underline, you can change the font type in there. You can even change the font color if you want to change the foreground color or background color. So, and the students will be able to see those as well. Perhaps most importantly, there's bullet points in here as well, so you can bullet point things. So in the old system, it just came out as one block of text without formatting. Formatting will be preserved now, so that you can put all of that formatting in there. I've just received one thing on the chat then. Can the students see this when it is in draft? No, the students cannot see the APP forms until they are submitted. And even further than that, the students can't see your form until they have also submitted their equivalent form. So they won't be able to see your mid-form until they've submitted their mid-form. Vice versa, you won't be able to see the student's mid-form until you've also submitted your mid-form. So both parties have to have submitted their form, and at that point, both parties will be able to see each of the forms. So that's strengths, areas of improvement, and you would just work down the form like you conventionally did, completing those. Right at the bottom then, because this is a mid-unit form, you have this skip mid-unit button. So the mid-unit APP has never been absolutely mandatory in the system. We certainly encourage both educators and students to fill it in, but you can skip it. If you click skip here, it'll ask you to confirm it, and it will say that any items already entered will be deleted. So if you've half filled the form in and then you decide to click skip, it will then, everything will be deleted for that particular form. Other buttons then, you have save and submit later, so you don't have to do all of this in one sitting. You might do one comment, come back to it later. So you can click that one, or when you're ready to go, you click the submit unit, mid-unit button, and that will then lock it in. So you can't make any further changes at that point. The other thing here is we've got this ability to indicate who was involved in completing this form. So while you can have multiple CEs associated with a student's clinical placement, some of those CEs may not have been involved in completing the form. And so this gives you the ability of either switching them on or switching them off, whether they were involved in the actual completion of the form, and the student is then fed back that information as well. So just a little more granularity about who is completing things. So what I'll do here is click the save and submit later button. If I do that, it will take me back here. You can see that this is still purple, so I can go back into that. Anything that I've entered to this point in time is still in there, but the form is still able to be edited at this point, so it's not locked down. If I try and go in, and this time I'll try and submit the form without completing everything, so it will give you a reminder saying that the form's incomplete. And as you scroll down, it'll show you everything that you haven't yet done. So you can see we need responses for these ones and these. And these, obviously I'm not doing comments at the moment, but I'll just make sure all of those are cleared. What I will do is I'll also do a low comment one there, and without putting in a comment, I'll try and submit. Same thing will happen because the low comments are mandatory as well. So we need to type something in there, whatever that would be, before we click on the submit button. If it detects that everything has been completed, it will ask you to confirm then the submission. And once you've confirmed, you can see here that this is now changed from purple to this gray color. It says that the form is submitted. If you click on it, it will say that you've completed it, but the student has not yet submitted their form. Once the student has submitted their form, you'll be able to view the responses. So just a little bit more signposting around what's happening with these forms. And you can see now that you've submitted your mid form, the end form is now able to be accessed, and you could go in to complete your end unit form. So just going back, I'll go back to my students here. I'm going to go to all students and view a student from earlier in the year. You can see that once both forms have been completed by both the students and the educator, they change to this blue button that says view mid or view end form. So that's where we were before. Remember, one submitted, the next one's open. Once the student submits their mid one, it will turn blue like that. And once both parties have submitted their end, it will turn blue like that. And if we want to view that, we'll click on this and it will show us those forms. So a couple of things on here. The big red banner says that it has yet to be ratified by the university. So it's an unofficial result. So you'll remember from the old system, once all the forms are submitted, it does go back to the university for ratification. They'll look through those, make sure that they're all okay, and then they will click the button to ratify that. Once the university ratifies it, this red banner will go away. So it will then be an official result. So a couple of things to explain on this view. So first of all, we're on this tab here, which is both the educator and student combined view. You can click this tab to make it educator only view, which will take the student parts of it away. But if we look at the combined view, you can see down here for each of the questions, it's got the educator score, the student score side by side. Underneath, in blue, the educator strengths, the educator areas of improvement, and then the students' comments on strengths and the students' comments on area of improvement. So you can sit down then with this form with your student in the debrief session, and you can work through both numbers and comments. And as we scroll down, you can see that that's the case for all of those different areas. So a fairly intuitive way of seeing that information. Right at the end, then we've got those global comments, educator comments, and student comments on that form. So again, if I go back to the top, if I do educator only tab, it's the same thing, but all of the student information has been removed. So the students will use this view, for example, to print out probably for job applications and things like that. They may not want their own reflections on there, but they do want those educator comments. At the top, very top of this form, then we've got two other buttons. So we can download the combined view one, or we can download the educator only one. Now, remember, I'm logged in as the facility coordinator here, not as the student. The student also gets these download options. But if you, as the educator, you want a record of this, a PDF of it, I could click on this button here, for example. It tells me it's generating a PDF, and when it's ready, we're going to find that in the My Files section over here in the menu. So it will actually generate in the background so that you can continue to interact with the form. You don't have to wait for it. But when it's ready, if you click over here on My Files, or if you just click on that here button, it'll take you to My Files, and you can see that this is the one I just generated then. To see that file, you can click on the download button, and then we'll just open that downloaded file. And this then will be a PDF of that end unit APP. Same format that we saw on the screen there with those numbers side by side, all of the comments top to bottom. So perhaps a cleaner view than what we certainly had in the older system with the PDFs. Okay, I think that's everything here really in this My Students section with respect to completing forms. We have the mid form, the end form, and then that exit questionnaire. In the old system, you only had one go at completing the exit questionnaire, and you had to do it immediately as you finished your end unit APP. It took you straight to that form, and as soon as you saved that, you couldn't go back into it, or if you closed your browser, you could never go back into that. This time, we have it open at any point in time. As soon as that end unit one has been completed, this one becomes available, and you can click on that exit questionnaire. And just to remind you what that's about, this is your ability to put percentage-wise what percentage of time the student completed in these different clinical areas, areas of practice, and then client types. And these are then used in the reports later for generating information about where students have actually spent their time. So there's a difference between where they were allocated to where they actually spent their time. And this form is really to collect with good granularity where they actually spent their time during the placement. It also asks then how many clinical days were they scheduled on this placement. And that's used then in some formulas later for figuring out how many days absence they've been over the course of the year, for example. So if it's a 5-week placement and they're there for every day of the week, you'd put 25 in there and then submit that exit form. If you've made a mistake and things only add up to 80% in one particular section, again, you'll get that text and it'll tell you that it has to add up to 100. So there is good prompting and safeguards around that. So that's the exit questionnaire. Once you've completed the exit questionnaire, it then becomes locked. You can't go back in there. Once it's submitted, that one's then finalized. So we're almost through the menu items. On the left, there is one for My Reports. Some facilities will have some reports associated with them, others will not. For example, if you're in a Queensland facility, I'm just going to change my active facility up here. If you're the coordinator of a Queensland facility, Queensland are now trialing a questionnaire for the educators to complete. And this is where you would go in as the facility coordinator to download the report based on those educator submitted surveys. If you don't have any reports, you'll simply see that you don't have any as per this facility here. Files we've been through. This is where you'll see both personal files, so files that you've generated versus files that are relevant to the whole facility. So if I did generate one of those reports, that report would appear up here as a facility file. And that means that any facility coordinator at that facility would have access to that report that's been generated. Whereas these are your own personal files and they wouldn't get to see those. Down to My Account then. So under My Account, we've had a look at a few of these things. So here is where you can change or you can remove your photo or you can rotate it. So sometimes if you upload a photo from a phone, it might come in sideways. So you can click that rotate button to rotate that around and get you back to the upright position. You can also edit details in here. You can edit your name, your email address. It gives you a bit of a reminder there that the email address is your username. So if you change that, you're changing your username for the system. And here is where you specify that minimum duration between reminder emails. So by default, it's 2 days. You won't get any more reminder. The maximum frequency you would get reminders is once every 2 days. But if you thought that was too soon, you could put that at 96 or 256 or whatever you think is appropriate for reminders for yourself. As a clinical education coordinator, you do have the ability to downgrade your account to a CE. So let's say that roles are changing in the facility. You no longer want the responsibility of being coordinator. You're just going to be a CE from this point in time. You could click this downgrade button. You'll have to confirm that. If I were to click confirm, then this account would change to be a CE account only. So you would lose all of the facility coordinator functionality of that. If that did happen and you wanted to reapply as a facility coordinator, as a CE, you would go back into My Account here, and that button now would say upgrade to facility coordinator account. And if you click that, it'll ask you to select a university to send the request to, and it's the university clinical education coordinators that are responsible for approving those facility coordinator accounts. So what I would do is click on this. I'd send it to University of Queensland or whoever. When the Uni CEM logs in for that university, they would see that request there and they would be able to process that. And as soon as they approve it, you would again have your facility coordinator access would return. Other things on this screen, you've got a list of your facilities up here. If you are leaving a facility, you can remove yourself from an association with that facility. So remember, the facility coordinators at that other facility can do that as well. But if you want to do it yourself, you could remove a facility here. Or if you're joining another facility, let's say that you've got a part-time job at a new facility that you're now going to take on that coordinator role for, you can click on Add Facility and you can go through that process of searching for a facility, selecting it, and then putting a comment in there, selecting the university that you want to send that request to, and then you can click Register on that. So that's the process that we use to add other facilities to your particular account. And the only other thing on that My Accounts page is it gives you an update on the progress of any of those account change request types. So if I'd requested an upgrade to a facility, it would give me an entry there saying that we're waiting for the university to do it, or the university has already done it, but they've rejected your account, and it would have the reason in there for rejection, and then you'd be able to reapply if you saw something like that. Okay, we're getting close to the end now. So under the Help tab, we have, I'll start with the tutorial videos. Everything I've gone through today has been recorded as a screen grab video. So if you want to see how we do, how we approve CE requests, if I click on that view video, it'll take me to a video, which then gives me that run through of exactly how to do that. And you can look at that in full screen if you like. So everything that I've just been through would be talked through on that particular video. So if you forget anything, you don't have to look at a manual. You can look at videos now. If none of those answer your questions, you can lodge a support request. So unlike the old system, which used external email to do that, support is now fully integrated into the system. So I can go lodge support request. I can then type my request in here. So let's just say I need to upgrade to a FacCEC account. So I can type that in there. Again, you can use formatting in there. You can upload photos even. If you've got a screen grab, if you're getting an error, you can upload a photo of the screen, and you can click send on that. So here we've got the concept of an inbox and a sent message. So there's that sent message that you've just sent. The reply would come in the inbox. So I'm just going to log out very quickly. I'll log in as the administrator now that would have received that support email request. I'll go in and I'll be able to view that email that you've just sent and reply to that. And I can also reply using things like images. So in my email reply here, I won't spend too long on this, just to give you the idea. And we can send that back. So as I log back in then as that facility coordinator at that hospital, you can see it gives me an alert that I've got one unread message. You can also see this mailbox over here pulsating blue. That's another indication that you've got a support request email returned to you. We can view that by clicking here. You can see it's a new email. To view it, we click over here, and there's the response from support about that. So support is fully integrated now. You don't have to go out into your own email system to do that. You will also receive an email saying that you've had a response to your support query in the system, so that again, you can be alerted to that, to the fact that someone's replied to your request, and then log into the system to see that. So I think we've covered just about everything. There are just a couple of other things that I do want to show you very, very quickly here in the remaining few minutes before I go for questions. And that is that the whole system has been written in such a way that it is mobile responsive. So if I change the device here, this is just emulating now an iPhone. You can see that the screen format changes to be able to format itself appropriately for that phone. If I turn the phone to the side, you can see that it reorientates itself so that it is all fully mobile compatible. It does mean that as a facility coordinator, you can do things on the go if you need to. So for example, if you suddenly remembered that you hadn't allocated a CE to a student, you could open your phone. It will all work on the phone environment, and you could go straight in here to do those allocations as per what we were talking about earlier. On the lists, sometimes on table formats like this, it says mobile devices may need to scroll right. So you may need to scroll to the right-hand side of that to see everything, but it is all functional on that particular screen, and it will give you signposts like that to make sure that you know what you're doing. You can see if we go to an iPad, again, the format will just automatically scale based on the particular platform that you're using at that point in time. So good news is you can complete it on an iPad or on a phone if you absolutely need to, although completing the APP forms would be quite onerous to do on one of those mobile devices. Right, I'm going to stop talking for a moment. I think you've now seen everything in the system. The only things I haven't clicked on are these icons here. So here's a shortcut for getting to my account. It'll take you to the exact same place. And this is the logout button, which will do the same thing as using the logout at the top right-hand corner of the screen there. So they are just duplicated functionality of some of those things. All right, I've just seen on chat that there are some things up there that I haven't noticed as they've come in. So the first one, and can the facility coordinators see these too? I assume that relates to the APP forms. Yes, so the facility coordinator can only see the APP forms of students that they are also assigned as a CE for. So under here, you will see, you'll only be able to see the forms for students that you've been assigned to. But let's just say that you need to see the form of one of these students. Let's just go back here. Let's say you need to see the form of this particular person in block 2. No, you're already the coordinator on that one. Let's say this student of Jace Floyd. You could just quickly go in here, even after the fact, you can assign yourself as a CE for this particular student. And once you've assigned yourself as a CE, you could go in here. They'll appear in your all students list, and then you would have access to those forms. So you do have to be assigned as an educator for the student to see the form, but there is a way that you can do that. Amina's asked there, can a CE be upgraded to FacCEC with the same email address? Yes, they can. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. So if I log out, I'm going to log into this account now as a clinical educator. So you would have seen me allocate a student to someone called Wanda earlier. So if I log in now as Wanda, you'll see the CE interface is much simpler. They don't get as many menu items. All they get is my students and files and my account. So they don't get all of that allocation stuff in there. So they can only see the students, their current students, and the other students that they've been allocated during the year. So this is a clinical educator. Let's go into my account. In here, it's going to say request facility FacCEC upgrade. Okay, so I'm not changing email address. I'm just requesting that upgrade. It's saying, please confirm you wish to upgrade your account type from CE to that. If you proceed, you will select a university where your request will be forwarded for approval. So remember, all facility coordinator accounts are approved by universities, and that's why this upgrade process also has to be approved by a university. So I'm going to click confirm on that. I'm going to say that I want that request to go to the University of Learning, and then it will tell me my upgrade request has been lodged. I'm going to log out now and actually log in as a Uni CEM from that University of Learning. On my interface here, I've got some tasks. One of those tasks is to approve the upgrade for Wanda. You can see here She's currently a clinical educator. She's requested access to this. She's requested it on that particular date. I can view that request. And in here, I can add notes about my decision. So if I'm rejecting it, I'll say, no, don't know who you are, or whatever the case may be, and you reject it, or we can approve it. So I'll go ahead and approve that. And now I'll log out. I'm going to log back in now as that person who was a clinical educator. And now you'll see they are now a facility coordinator with all of those facility coordination responsibilities. Another question here, Android, yes. Any phone, any mobile device, it will work on. So I just did some Apple ones there. Here's a Galaxy S5. Again, everything sizes appropriately for that. A Galaxy Fold, which is super, super narrow. You can do it on a Surface Duo, any mobile device, it will appropriately work for. Can the uni set up the facility coordinator, or does the facility coordinator have to apply? The facility coordinator theoretically has to apply, but there's no reason why the university couldn't go out here and click the register button and click apply here and fill this in on the behalf of that facility coordinator. You could certainly go, anyone can go on and do that process, but it does go to the university for approval. So as a university person, you could go in here and put all of your FacCEC details in here, select your own university, and then click the register button, and then you could log in as the university person and approve that facility request. The FacCEC then, the first they would know about that is they would receive an email saying, welcome to APPLinkup, here's your username, here's your password, and away you go. So yes, you can do that process on their behalf. Any other questions then? We've got a few minutes remaining. Maybe in the last minute or two, here's another one. If you work as a FacCEC with multiple universities, do you need to request with each individually? No. So a university has to approve your account, but it can be any university. And once your account is approved, the account exists and it will be visible to all of the universities. So it's just the approval process that you have to elect one university to send it to. So it's probably going to be maybe the university you've had the most to do with, or that you receive the most students from. Basically, the university who are most likely to know who you are, because they're the person that's going to make the decision about whether your account is approved or not. And as soon as you're approved, that's it. You don't need to do that for each university. I might just show you in the last few minutes, if you think about any final questions, I'll show you what it's like from the student's perspective. If I can remember a student login. This one. So from the student's perspective, sometimes it's good for you to know what this looks like because, you know, you're dealing with students on the other end. It's been simplified from the student's perspective to give them on their landing screen just their clinical blocks, the dates, where they are, and what they've done so far on that block. So have they completed their mid and end form? Have they done their exit questionnaire or any additional questionnaires that are associated with their particular university? And on this particular view, you can see that very quickly. Once they click on the select button, it gives them all of those details again. So phone numbers, addresses, what the placement is. Here's their forms. So they've got their mid form. It tells them student or educator has completed or hasn't completed them. It'll tell them if the form can be completed or if it's locked. So just like it is for that educator, it gives them all the signposts. If they try and click on that, it'll tell them they can't do it until they've done this one, for example. It shows them their educators ahead of time. And this is where it might be nice to actually have the pictures in there. Gives them their email addresses if they need to contact them at any stage, either before or after the placement. And it also tells them who the coordinators are at that particular facility. And it just so happens that they're the same. The facility coordinators are the educators for the students. Normally they would be different. But what that means is if the student need to contact the coordinator for any reason, they've got that detail ahead of time as well. It also gives them one final bit of information that if they don't have an educator assigned for them on their placement, it actually says to them, you don't have an educator assigned to you yet. If you're currently on placement, contact your facility coordinators and ask them to allocate you to an educator, because that would be unusual if you've started and you don't yet have an educator. It gives them an instruction about what to do. Another question here. So can universities add in their own questionnaires for students to complete at the end of each block? It is possible. Queensland are doing that. It does require funding and extra work to work up those questionnaires. But yes, individual universities or groups of universities or even groups of facilities can now have their own questionnaires built into this system. We've added that functionality, but it does require extra funding for all of the coding time to put those together. But there is, in Queensland at the moment, there's a trial of two different ones, one for the students and one for the educator, which has more information around the experience of the clinical placement. So that is in addition to the APP forms. So if you have a requirement for something like that, you can contact me outside of this and I can talk you through the processes involved in doing that. And we have 1 minute left. Any final questions?
Thank you, Trevor.
That's okay. What I might do right now is I'll stop the share on that one and I'll stop the recording at this